Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
There is a presidential election in 5.5 months, folks. And lest you say, duh, what is this guy talking about? What does he think we're stupid? No, it's just that we may never have seen so little attention paid to a presidential campaign and this dramatic and intervening event during a campaign ever. But the election's coming off one way or another, and now Joe Biden's under the Klieg lights again for his role in the Michael Flynn affair. Here to help us pick up where we essentially left off 2 months ago and where we're likely to pick up with a real presidential campaign again is LibertyNation.com political columnist, our old friend, Joe Schaefer. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Tim. Good to see you again.
It's been way too long, my friend. We did this about a month ago, but there wasn't much to talk about. But now there is regarding Joe Biden. So let me put the question to you right off the bat. How big a problem is it for the former vice president ultimately that he was one of some 36 Obama officials who requested to unmask Michael Flynn?
Yeah, it should be a major deal. This should be investigating. The investigators should be huge now that we're learning more each day. I just don't think it's going to be. This country has been so polarized on this issue ever since Trump took office. And I just think that the minds have been made and they're not going to be changed, even though they should be. Undecided voters, people who were never had a strong feeling on this, have tuned it out a long time ago because it was so overblown. The coronavirus has come in. I just don't think they want to engage in this. And the people who are engaged on this, they've made up their minds a long time ago on who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. So I think Biden's going to get a pass on this. And it's a shame because he really does not deserve it.
So it looks like we're looking in one way or another at a shorter election campaign, much shorter than we're used to, effectively. Would that be good for the country? Would it be good for Trump? Would it be good for Biden?
I think it's great news for Joe Biden. The least effort he has to put in and the more mistakes that he can avoid as a result, the better off he is. They want to package Biden. They want to hide him. I think that they'd love a New York, a Democratic campaign strategist who worked for Pete Buttigieg wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying as much. They'd love to have this guy do nothing but local and national TV news appearances. And that's his whole campaign. So for the Democrats, this is ideal. I think Trump, live debates, get out there, meet people. That's what he's best at. He draws energy from that. So I think a standard campaign like 2016 would help Trump more. I still think he's in a great situation, so I think he's okay. For the country at large, we have politics 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So short, long campaign. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, but I do think it helps Biden and maybe takes away a little bit from Trump. Although, like I said, he's still looking pretty good.
Well, it feels almost like parliamentary elections, where they have usually a 6 or 8 week campaign. It doesn't go on for like 18 months or 2 years like we have here. And whether we like it or not, that's what we're likely to get effectively again. I mean, the campaign is on, but there's not much attention on it. Seems to me it'll really focus attention again when the conventions come during the summer. But the question about whether this break's been good for Joe Biden or not, to me, revolves around whether the voters will accept in this new COVID world or post-COVID world, whatever you're going to call where we are in November, whether they'll accept a candidate who's distancing himself, socially distancing himself from the voters or not, because they're certainly not used to that.
Yeah, and I think Biden is almost just a figurehead at this point. He just represents, let's get a Democrat in the White House. No one's excited about Joe Biden. In a weird way, I think it's these Democrat governors and their over the top, I would call it tyrannical policies that are going to influence how Joe Biden does. Whitmer in Michigan and the governor in Oregon, they are treating their citizens like children. And they are saying, I don't care how you think about it. You are doing what I say. And I think there will be some kind of backlash on this with voters. And that is going to seal Biden's doom if he does lose, more than anything Joe Biden's going to do. I think what happens with how voters react to these lockdowns and the coronavirus is going to have more to do with this election than anything Joe Biden's going to do over the next few months.
Okay, so then that begs the question. Coronavirus has changed the entire political climate. It's changed the issues. It's at the top of people's lists of concerns, of top issues for the election, something that they'd never even heard of 3 months ago, and now it's the most important issue. Does the fact of the coronavirus intervention itself help Trump or hurt Trump?
I think he would have been better off had it never happened. The economy would be still sailing along. Not that it was perfect, but it was doing well. He's still popular with his base. That's not going to change. So I don't know if it hurts him as much. It's just strange how this feeds into a democratic dynamic. They always have to have a crisis. Russia, the Kavanaugh Supreme Court nomination, the Ukraine. There's always got to be some apocalyptic event to unite them. And what we've learned from the 3 previous apocalyptic events that I mentioned is it didn't really convince the American people as a whole. So they're 0 for 3 if you really look at it. Coronavirus, they're hoping to hit a home run with and get Joe Biden in. I don't see any reason to believe it's going to happen. And I think Trump's been just fine through this whole thing. I don't think he's been a superstar, which he portrays himself as, but he's handled the situation fine. I don't think voters are going to resent him. And I don't think they're going to be convinced by the latest Democratic doomsday scenario to vote for Joe Biden in November. It's going to go over about as well as the other circuses.
So Trump has been exposed day after day, to a degree that he wouldn't be even as a sitting president seeking re-election because of the COVID crisis. Now, of course, he's tamping down the appearances now. They're shorter, less frequent, but nevertheless, he's up there, or has been over the course of these 2 months, pretty much every day trying to be large and in charge, which is really what a president needs to be here. But has that attention, which is the flip side of having to deal with a crisis, is that you can show that you're in command. You get an opportunity to demonstrate command of a crisis. Has all that attention been a good thing for Trump, or has it exposed some of his weaknesses, re-exposed some of his weaknesses to voters who've been very wary of the constant political battles during his administration?
Well, I think the key thing you mentioned is the energy, the dynamic. He has shown unlimited reserves of energy. And when you look at his presumptive opponent, who seems to be fading by the day, has no energy, that's going to play well for him in November. I think people look past the sound bites and individual quotes that you can carve up Trump with. That's never hurt him before. We learned that in 2016. And they look at the big picture. And I still think that his supporters are behind him 100%. But the people who voted for him in 2016 are going to see him the same way, that he's still this change agent, that he's different from this establishment. He's not in step with them in a way that the Democratic establishment, and Joe Biden is the Democratic establishment, conjures up. So I think that him constantly being on is just fine. And I think he's going to, again, represent to the American people that I am not part of this establishment. Saying reopen the country is going to help him when this establishment is saying, hey, let's not do that. And the American people, quite frankly, are ready to reopen.
I think these signs are unmistakable. Now, I have to leave with a question that is unavoidable given Joe Biden's, shall we say, deteriorating neurological condition, the gaffes. I mean, this week he forgot the question that he was asked during a big interview on Good Morning America by George Stephanopoulos. Now, whether that was deliberate or not, I don't know which would be worse, that he actually did forget it or that he pretended he forgot it because he wanted to evade the question about Michael Flynn. But you can't avoid the question of whether there's still a chance that the Democratic Party could turn tail and pick someone else to be their presidential nominee. Is there any kind of realistic chance that that could still happen?
Yeah, I think so. Just because I think they may be forced to. Biden breaks down completely. I mean, he's really limping along, and we've got a long way to go. Again, every time a name comes up, they seem to get shot down of their own accord. Governor Cuomo in New York with his nursing home scandal, which is really bad. Look at the incompetence of putting the most vulnerable population at risk like that. That is going to have huge political ramifications if they throw his name up there. I think he's hurt big time by that. And so we've lost another one of their heroes of the moment. So they're going to have to come up with somebody else. I don't see anyone on the horizon right now. They may be stuck with Joe Biden, and they may go into November with a voting base that does not care about this guy. I think that a lot of people are going to stay home, which of course would help Trump because his supporters are going to get out there and vote.
Okay, Joe, great to have you back in the saddle again. We'll be doing this with greater frequency as we approach the election, which, again, folks, is only 5.5 months away from deciding the future of the country for the next 4 years and perhaps well beyond that. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That is Joe Schaefer, political columnist for LibertyNation.com.